Start. Oh, here we go. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Thoughtful Bro. That was like a very kind of like Mr. Rogers, Barney kind of like, hey, kids.
Hey, who are you, Mark? How scary you are today. Woo.
Starting over, though we're still live. Welcome, everybody, to the Thoughtful Bro. I am here today with Mighty Blaze, co-founder and CEO, and all-round literary superstar Jenna Blum for an amazing 45 minutes about her new book, Woodrow on the Bench. You're going to laugh, you're going to cry, and you're going to be riveted to your screen or phone during the next 45 minutes. So a little bit of intro from me before we get started. We're live here every Tuesday at 2 on A Thoughtful Bro, talking about what makes great books tick, what makes great authors tick. Mighty Blaze is an all-volunteer initiative to help writers reach readers virtually during COVID and beyond. And you can find all of our fabulous interviews on the Mighty Blaze Facebook page and YouTube pages. At Mighty Blaze, we never are asking for your money. If you want to support us or tell us you like us, or just give us that little boost of support, just give us a like and a follow on social media. That means Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or YouTube. All it takes is a little click, and we all just feel so great when we see those follows and likes keep rising. If you want to know more about Mighty Blaze, you can go to our website at mightyblaze.com. You can sign up for our newsletter there. Every Sunday, you get a list of all the author interviews that are coming up that week. And we also have the Mighty Blaze podcast, which is now in its third season. That has been doing great too. If you are in the mood to spend some money, please spend it on books that promise you big wisdom, big heart, and big ugly cries. Books like Woodrow on the Bench by Jenna Blum. If you want to ask a question to Jenna, please put it in the comments. They will make their way to me, and we'll save some time for questions at the end. And a quick tease for next week on The Thoughtful Bro, we'll have on Mitch Albom, who wrote one of the best-selling memoirs of all time called Tuesdays with Morrie. Over 39 million copies of Mitch Albom's books are in print. And that, again, is next Tuesday to talk about his new book, called The Stranger in the Lifeboat. That's actually his pub day. So Thoughtful Bro will probably be his first interview on his pub day. That's always exciting. But now on to our fantabulous guest. Jenna Blum is the New York Times and #1 internationally bestselling author of the novels Those Who Save Us, The Storm Chasers, and The Lost Family. Oprah.com listed her as one of the top 30 women writers at work today. Jenna also happens to be the co-founder and CEO of literary social media marketing company, Mighty Blaze. She earned her MA at Boston University in creative writing and has taught writing workshops at Grub Street Writers for more than 20 years, which is how I happened to have the good fortune of meeting Jenna. She's based in downtown Boston, where she lives across the street from Woodrow's Bench and is currently a dog mom to her black lab puppy, Henry Higgins. Her new book, Woodrow on the Bench, is about her senior black lab and what she learned from their last 7 months together. The tagline for the book, which already gets people weepy, is "For anyone who's ever loved an old dog." It's already the #1 new release on both pet loss, grief, and animal care on Amazon. Jodi Picoult said, "When I say Jenna Blum's upcoming book wrecked me, and that I'm now sobbing and eating all the chocolate, I mean it in the best way possible." Jenna, welcome to the Thoughtful Bro.
Thank you, bro. It's so good to be here and very, very meta.
Well, I mean, we have to just point out that the Thoughtful Bro would not exist without you, because it wouldn't exist without Mighty Blaze, which you started. But it was about a year and a half ago that you and I started talking about doing a show, and the Thoughtful Bro was sort of our brainchild. And so I'm just eternally grateful to you, Jenna.
I am eternally grateful to you. It has been such a great thing. I don't know how many of you caught our initial Bro and Ho show when we were doing like a trailer for the Thoughtful Bro from my roof in Minnesota, where I was in the summer of 2020. But I was like really hopped up on coffee that day, and I'm like, yo, with Bro and Ho. So, I mean, this is how it always is behind the scenes. And you see Mark interviewing these fantastic people like George Saunders and like Lieutenant Colonel Vindman. And I'm like, yo, bitches, behind the scenes. So I'm usually the producer. Today we have Mighty Margaret producing. And I'm so happy to see so many people in our audience. And thank you for this. This is my first interview for Woodrow on the Bench. We launched it last night here in Boston at the Coolidge Corner Theater with Jodi Picoult, which was amazing. And so I'll be doing a lot of live events, but also virtual. And this is my first virtual event. I'm thrilled and honored to have it with Mark on the Thoughtful Bro.
Yes. And I also just want to say, so we use this platform called StreamYard to broadcast, and like in StreamYard, you can see the producer, like the producing team at the bottom of the screen. And so sometimes when I'm doing my interviews, I'll see Jenna there. Like if there's like some great answer that she loves, I see her like right below me going like, yeah. Or like doing a little dance.
Yeah.
It's sometimes hard to concentrate. But anyway, we have to talk about your book.
Okay.
I have always found your work, Jenna, to have certain hallmarks. I find your work to always be emotionally fearless. I find it has a great generosity of spirit, just the spirit of somebody who like just wants to bear it all and share it with the reader and create a bond with the reader. And certainly that big-heartedness is in this book. And I guess, but just, without me going on more about it, can you just talk about a little bit about where this book came from, why you wrote it, that kind of stuff?
I can. So WOODROW on the Bench, which I keep holding up like this. Like I feel like every time I say the title, I have to hold up the book because it's one of few actual print books in existence right now. This is one of the ARCs. WOODROW on the Bench is about my 15-year-old black lab, Woodrow, and how in the last 7 months of his life, after he was diagnosed with congestive heart failure, he wasn't able to walk very well and actually wasn't predicted to live more than a couple of weeks. But he lasted that 7 months, and every day of that 7 months and every night, I would carry him like an 85-pound log in a harness across the street from our downtown Boston apartment to sit on what became known as Woodrow's bench because it's the closest one to our front door, and that was as far as he could get. So every day, morning and night, I would sit on the bench with my iPad. Woodrow would wump down into the dirt next to the bench, and he would hold court there. And his incredible Woodrow magnetism, not for nothing was he known as Woodrow the George Clooney of dogs, drew people to us. And to my great astonishment, this whole community grew up around us while we were sitting on the bench of neighbors and friends and total strangers who all came down the Commonwealth Mall to help me and my old boy and keep us company on the bench. And I just thought, I had plenty of time to think while I was sitting there. And I thought how extraordinary it is that an old dog who had like 4 teeth in his mouth that leaned every which way, like old tombstones, and had like stinky breath and cataracts, he had the power to draw people together in a time of great incivility and intolerance. And it spoke so beautifully not only of dog power, but of people's yearning to feel good and to connect. And so that's what WOODROW on the Bench is about.
And Jenna, can I ask you, you've written 3 novels before, and this is a departure for you writing memoir. I guess my question is, when did you feel like you had it? You had a book like this you thought to yourself, oh, this definitely is something that needs to be out in the world.
While I was on the bench, I knew that I was going to write about Woodrow.
Okay.
Because I've been writing since I was 4, and I have been, I wouldn't say honing my skills, but I have at least been building those writing muscles. It's what I do. And I love this dog so much. Like he was my structure and my daily joy and my companion and my pal and my silliness and laughter and everything that pets are, that dogs are to their owners. And I thought I need to pay homage to him. And so I'm going to write about him once he has crossed over. But it became apparent to me while I was on the bench observing this impromptu community that grew up that I had a basket for the story. And anybody who writes memoir or fiction, like you need a structure for a story. I thought, okay, instead of writing about his whole life, because how do you memorialize somebody who's had an extraordinary long life? I'm just going to write about this last 7 months and what it taught me.
Yeah. And just so everybody understands, can you do the dog years conversion? Like how old was he and how old does that mean he was in human years when he actually passed?
So old. I knew you should ask me a math question on air. Why would you do this to me? I am so bad at math. This is why I'm a writer. So
Gotcha.
Woodrow was over 100 in dog years. So I'm not making that up because it's somewhere in the book, but I think he was when he passed 109 years old. And labs typically live, they're big dogs. They typically live to be somewhere around 10, 11. When they're 8 years old, they're considered geriatric, much to my indignation. But when Woodrow passed, he was 50. So he was basically Methuselah. And when I was sitting on the bench, people would say, how old is that dog? And sometimes they'd be like, is the dog breathing? And he'd be like, yes, I am breathing. And I'd say 15, and people were astonished. They were like, you must be doing something right. And I think that it was because people loved Woodrow that he lasted so long.
Yeah. this was a dog who was so loved. And I want to talk about one technique that you use in the book, which is like conversations that you have with your dog. It's you say, so you call your dog, you call Woodrow Kooks, and Kooks calls you Mamu. And, there's these like passages, they aren't too long, but, like, hey, Kooks, this is what's going on with me today. And then Kooks says back to you, Mamu, like, I know you're thinking about that, but that's not important right now. And it does a lot as a device in the book. I mean, it shows me the bond, how strong it is between you. It's also very funny and charming. And you know what it reminded me of is like the relationship between Han Solo and Chewie. And, so what happens like in the movie, like in Star Wars, A New Hope, there's like this moment where they're going to go down in this dumpster where they're going to get crushed. And like Chewie's like, "Rah!" and then Han is like, well, we're going in there anyway. I don't care how bad it smells to you. And so that like Han is like understanding Chewie, like, but nobody else can, right? And there was that same like very charming, big-hearted relationship between you and Woodrow. And so I just wanted for you to talk about that, because I just love those parts of the book so much.
Thank you. I didn't know you loved those parts of the book so much, so thank you. That is good to hear. So I challenge all dog owners out there to say that they don't do this with their dogs. Like, and dog and cat owners, like, we have voices for our animal charges, our animal companions. And actually, I got asked this question last night at the launch about, Woodrow's voice. And I said, it's not me doing the Woodrow voice. It's Woodrow doing the Woodrow voice and broadcasting it into my head. And I am merely the vessel that lets the voice out into the world. And Woodrow's voice sounds very much like a combination of George Clooney and Barack Obama, which Jodi Picoult said sounds like the perfect man. And I have to agree about that. And so he would always
But how does that sound, Jen?
Okay, I'll find you a passage, right?
We have to do a reading. I'm so excited. I skipped over the reading, but we'll do
I
that.
will. I mean, I can try and find you like a Woodrow passage reading, but I'll just give you one example I opened randomly. Like, Woodrow comments throughout the book about, my human foibles mostly, and he perfected his voice on his Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter feeds, which he had maintained this very robust social media presence throughout his life. But here's what he sounded like. So once upon a time, Thanksgiving had also been the best day ever, and then some. Woodrow's perspective on Thanksgiving was, Mamu, a giant bird comes into the house and goes into the oven. We should do this every day. So that's what Woodrow sounds like. My apologies to George Clooney and Barack Obama. And in fact, when I was greatly privileged to talk to the audiobook narrator, whose name is Anne Marie Gideon, and she's fantastic, she called me because she said, I want to make sure that I get Woodrow's voice exactly right. And I was like, it's George and Barack. And she's like, well, what does that actually sound like? And I did it for her. And she's like, oh, okay, now I get it. Okay, good. So audiobook also drops today, I think. So you can tell me if you think she did a good job.
Well, by the way, I should point out, though, that not all dogs beam their voice into your mind with the same exact tone. I mean, your dog that you have now, Henry Higgins, has a different voice. Is that correct?
That is correct. And Henry's voice kind of sounds like Mickey Mouse on steroids a little bit, because Woodrow is like this very elegant dog who my friend Sonia Larson described as a person in a dog suit, a gentleman in a dog suit. And Henry is a dog in a dog suit. And he's young, and he's only 19 months now. He sounds like Lades, because he calls me Lades, short for lady. And he's like, Lades, also hamburger and ball, also hamburger. And why are you talking about book about old dog, Lades? Dog needs to go out now, Lades. But Woodrow always sounded like George Clooney, even when he was like 19 months old. And I think Henry may always sound like this, although except at some point his voice may break, like Peter Brady. So he'll be like, Lades, dog needs a hamburger. I mean, who knows? And we'll find out. Time will tell.
Oh my gosh. Well, look, I want to pause for a second. We have a great audience I can see out there. Folks, please pop your questions into the chat, and I will ask Jenna them in maybe 15, 20 minutes. But Jenna, did you want to do a reading from the work?
Would you like me to read from my work? From my oeuvre? From my Woodrow oeuvre?
I would like you to.
Okay, I shall in that case. I just happen to have a reading here, Mark, and it might even have some Woodrow voice in it. So I'm going to read from Woodrow on the Bench. Bing. I'm going to read you guys something called an interstitial. So the book is set up, it has 7 chapters, And each chapter is a month that Woodrow lived past his congestive heart failure diagnosis. So each chapter is like a little miracle, actually, and each month has its own lessons. So the lesson that I learned from Woodrow that month, it could be you are not invisible, or ask for help, or let people in. And between each chapter, there's an interstitial, like a tiny little essaylet that will introduce like our neighborhood and introduce the bench and the people we met on the bench. So I'm going to read you one of the first interstitials, and it's called Drive-Bys. Okay, ready? So I came prepared with my reading and my glasses. Growing up, I read mostly in my mother's Judith Krantz novels about women who could stop traffic simply by stepping into the street. Those heroines do not live in Boston. If I try to cross Commonwealth Avenue at the wrong time or emerge between parked cars instead of using the crosswalk, there is an excellent chance I will be mowed over, usually by somebody in a BMW, which I have long since decided, forgive me Beamer drivers, is an acronym for asshole. But that is before I discover my secret weapon, Woodrow. Not young Woodrow, whom drivers were equally happy to squash like a cartoon character beside me, but old Woodrow, limping across the street in his harness. The first time Woodrow's legs give out, we are, in fact, in the middle of Commonwealth Avenue. Commonwealth is a major Boston thoroughfare, and drivers are always trying to catch all the green lights. Our block is especially bad as it feeds onto Storrow Drive, Boston's answer to the West Side Highway, so people drive in high speeds and high tempers. We are running this gauntlet to get to Woodrow's bench in a human/canine game of Frogger, as we do every day, when suddenly, for no reason, Woodrow sinks to the pavement. He looks up at me, scared. Mom, what's happening to me? It's okay, Kooks, I say, straining to pick him up before the light turns. Just help me out here. Let's get out of the street, okay? But Woodrow can't move. The light changes. It's like a starting gun goes off. Traffic hurtles towards us and screeches to a stop. I brace myself for a barrage of insults and profanity. I'm stooped over with my arms encircling Woodrow's belly, trying to lift him and maneuver him to safety. A man does yell at us out his window. Hey, you need some help there? This is how it always is with Woodrow. I make every effort to ensure Commonwealth is clear before we cross, but sometimes Woodrow is extra slow, or people barrel off Storrow Drive, and then we are in the way. Yet in a city whose mouthy drivers would put New Jersey to shame, people call encouragement. You go, dog, you got this, or how old's your pooch? Sometimes if the light's red and they're stuck in traffic, drivers will yell narratives at me through their windows about their own geriatric dogs. Duke, Scout, Pedro, all left at home. One morning, I am helping Woodrow inside after a bench sit. It's one of his bad days. He is lurching forward like Captain Ahab on the foredeck. I grip his harness with both hands and call thank you to the drivers who are patiently waiting. They lift their fingers from their steering wheels or look up from their smartphones to give me a nod. Once we've reached the sidewalk, I turn back again to wave and find one guy still sitting there in his truck. The light is green, so he could go. People are honking at him, swearing, swerving around him into the free lane. He's watching us, me and Woodrow, and I realize he's waiting for us to get safely inside. When I reach our building's front door, he salutes us and yells, "What you're doing with your dog? It's a great thing. You can see how much he loves you. It's a beautiful thing. Beautiful."
Oh, thank you, Jenna. There's so many great moments like that. There's another moment where somebody says, you're sort of depressed about how old he is. And this woman says to you, well, growing old, it isn't a disease, it's a privilege. And there's just so many, people sort of come out of the woodwork all through your life with these little nuggets of wisdom, kind of inspired by Woodrow. I also love that bit in there about he looks like Ahab walking on the deck. I've seen Woodrow. I saw Woodrow walk, and that is so how he walked.
Poor guy. He was so lame. And those of you who have big dogs, and especially labs, their legs kind of give out before the rest of them do. And so even before he had his congestive heart failure diagnosis, he had a really hard time walking, and he had acupuncture. Like I had a home vet who came actually to the reading last night, that she would come to the house to give him acupuncture, and we did water therapy with him. And because when he was younger, he was such a baller and really athletic and loved to run. And when he was old, he would just lurch, but it didn't mean that he didn't enjoy his life and his food and his toys. He loved the ladies, so, it was my job to help him move around.
So, Jenna, this, as I said at the top of the show, is a departure for you. It's something different. You're writing memoir, you're not writing fiction. I guess, one of the things that you and I talked about kind of in the early stages of when you were writing this book was how to deepen the work. And there's a couple of things about that. So one thing I'm wondering first is, is it harder or easier to get at emotions and make for emotional reading if it's fiction or it's memoir, or does that question not quite make sense?
No, it totally tracks. And I'm thinking about it. Many people ask me about the difference between writing fiction and memoir. And I think for me, fiction is harder because I have to invent characters and situations from thin air. And so for me, because I believe all my characters are real, it feels more like being a medium most of the time and trying to draw down those people. And I find that tremendously hard and time consuming, which is why I write a novel every 3 to 5 years. But writing memoir, all I have to do is tell what really happened as accurately and honestly and candidly as possible, and hopefully entertainingly as well. But there is a level of emotional honesty in memoir that you need, because that's how you reach your audience. Whereas in fiction, you're always trying to hide your hand, right? So in fiction, if you can see the writer's hand at work, it's the worst thing you can say in a writing workshop. The writer is not supposed to be there. You're supposed to believe that the imaginary people are completely real with no intermediary. But in memoir, my job is to reach across the gulf between me and another human being and say, this is how my life felt to me. Take my hand. Like, do you feel this way too? And in order to do that, and this, Mark, is you have to reveal something about your own vulnerabilities in the moment. And the reason I say Mark knows this is that Mark, who is actually in the memoir, was one of the people who came to keep me company in my apartment writing when Woodrow wasn't mobile. And I was describing the project to him and our on-air host, Jenna Payon, who does Lit Chick. They were both writing with me pre-pandemic. And Mark said, well, memoir about a dog isn't really about a dog. It's also about the person who owns the dog. And JB, like, the hardest thing for you in this book is sitting alone on the bench with your dog. And why were you all alone on the bench? So writing about the choices I had made in my life that then made Woodrow's end chapter more difficult for me, that is very vulnerable making. And, I had chosen to put my career over having a family. I had been married and then I got divorced. And I undertook the non-traditional life for very good reasons to me. And at the same time, it meant that I was really, really alone at some very difficult moments. And so I'm very curious, when you guys get a chance to read Woodrow, like, what you think about my sort of revealing of my emotional underwear. Like, how does that strike you? Because it is very, like, ticklish sort of feeling.
Yeah. And I mean, I think, part of when I said that to you, I think you say in the book about yourself that you always wanted two things in life. You wanted to be a writer and you wanted to have a big love in your life. And what's so interesting about you is like how you have really stuck to your guns, and you have lived in many ways a really uncompromising life, and you have really gone for these things that you truly wanted. And to me, that was like, it's such an interesting thing about you as a person. And that was what I wanted to see in the book. And I thought, God, I think a lot of other people would really respond to that too.
I hope so. Bro, you're so great. So I remember this conversation was so vivid. And I remember Mark saying to Mark and Jenna, don't you think it's like totally pathetic if I'm talking about my life choices? Like, this is a book about my dog. Like, it's a memoir about my old dog. And I feel like, if I'm like whining about how I don't have a husband and I don't have kids, and therefore I had to like carry my big heavy dog across the street, I was reliant on neighbors and strangers to help me, like, boo-hoo, And what Mark said at that point, and I, again, hope this is true, and I hope I've done a good job living up to your advice, was because I made untraditional choices as a woman, I could perhaps hold up that little torch for other women who are making untraditional choices and thinking, what are the benefits of that and what are the consequences? And the benefits are that I have an amazing career. I have friends who are my family, who I work with every day. Like, now I'm going to get all choked up. God damn it. Like, I have people who I love. I feel like Woodrow taught me too, that in your extremity, you can throw yourself on the world and the world will hold you up. And I should not probably love that adjective uncompromising, but I take it as a compliment because there are things that I really wanted that I didn't give up on and will never give up on. Like I'll never give up on writing. I'll never give up on trying to help other writers. Never give up on having that great romantic love. And so, which I have potential to have now. And partly because I think I'm more honest in my life. And partly because of the things that you guys have all taught me. So thank you for that.
Well, it's very inspiring to me, and it does show up in the book. So anyway, it's just another great quality of the work. So I had something. So just another quick question. You're a writing teacher, right? And you spent your whole life as a writing teacher. And I always just find it interesting when, because so many creative writers are writing teachers. It's just a common way to make a living for writers when the book money isn't flowing in. And so, but I'm always interested, like, what do writing teachers struggle with? Because you are an incredible writing teacher, certainly one of the best writing teachers I've ever had. And you've given me such great thoughts about my own work over time. But here you are, you're struggling with creating your work. Is that, I mean, as a writing teacher, is that surprising to you that you like still quite can't get it right or can't kind of see your own work from the outside the way others might?
No, I mean, every writer knows this. You can easily tell other people what to do. And I think that you know from taking my workshop and also from working with me on Blaze that I'm very bossy. I mean, much to my own great surprise, I'm a very bossy person. So I always have like really strong opinions about what other writers should do and ways to be helpful that then they are totally free to take or leave. But you know, it's always easier to see somebody else's work and to see solutions for their work than it is to see in your own work. I think I have one of my strengths as a writer is that I know when things are working and not working, usually. I don't always know how to fix the things that aren't working, and that's one of the reasons I so highly value my writing community. And by the way, the people who I teach in my workshop for Grub Street are also my peers and colleagues who are publishing and who are my equals in every way. And the only reason that I'm even called a teacher in this workshop is that I moderate the discussion. But I'm very grateful to have such esteemed colleagues to work with. And I have a couple of readers. People often ask me, like, who are the early readers for your work? Like, Mark was an early reader of my work. The people I work with are early readers. And what I do when I give you guys the manuscript is say, like, I know what is wrong with this. And you may see things that are wrong with it that I can't see, but mostly I kind of know what is wrong with this. And I would love your feedback on how to fix it because those answers are not here and it's not expedient for me to wait 40 years to figure out what they are. So that's kind of what I use my writing community for in the purest writing sense.
Right. So another thing that really struck me about this work is that it's a work about grief, but it's not necessarily, and it is about a dog, but to me, it had a very powerful effect on me because I am not somebody who would pick up a book about grief, about human grief. This is just not something that I am particularly interested in reading about, and for better or for worse, I'm not saying that that's a healthy aspect of who I am or anything, but it's just not something I would pick up. But I sort of picked up this book, I mean, obviously because you're my friend, but it's like sort of like wise lessons from an old dog. And I thought, okay, I'm just going to read about this like incredible loving relationship between this woman and her dog. But then of course, by the time it gets into all the grief and aging and dealing with old age of a loved one, it had already got its teeth in me and it just got me. And I think it just surprised me. And the point that I want to say is that I think that this is not just a book for people to try to figure out their feelings about their old dogs who have passed away. It is a book for anybody who deals with human grief. I mean, these are the same emotions, and it just really got me in that way. I mean, I don't own a dog, but it got me as a book about grief, and it got me thinking about people in my life who have passed away.
Thank you. I'm glad Woodrow sunk his teeth into you, his 4 remaining teeth. And thank you for bringing that up because, again, the book about the dog is always about the dog, but it's also about more than the dog. And the backstory to Woodrow that people who've pre-read it sometimes ask me about is my mom. My mom had passed away from breast cancer a few months before Woodrow got his congestive heart failure diagnosis. And the question there tends to be like, is that the reason you kept him around so long, kept him alive so long? And I wanted to clarify that that's not why. That before, like when Woodrow was young, like long before any of this happened, I read Anna Quinlan's fantastic memoir, Good Dog Stay, about her old dog. And her formula for when to help her dog cross the river was, if the nose and the tail are still working, the dog is happy, and I will try to keep the dog alive and comfortable. So that was my formula with Woodrow as well, to try and figure out, when was it time to let him go. And I had a really great quality of life calculator from my vet that's in the book that helps dog owners figure out when to let their pets go. But my point with all this is that I think there's a quality of life issue that I learned with Woodrow that I also learned with my mom, that when my mom was very, very sick in like the last week of her life, it was really the only time when I thought, okay, it's probably time for her to go. Her personality is no longer here. It's being eclipsed by the journey of that passage. You could see her getting farther away. And so Woodrow allowed me to feel in a very immediate way all of these issues, because I was responsible for him in a way that I wasn't with my mom. But he allowed me to feel very acutely the grief and the decision making that when my mom was going, I just felt as a confusion and sort of a numbness and kind of muscling through every day. So it is my hope that people who read Woodrow find some solace and comfort in being in that last chapter with their dogs and with their animal companions, because it's a hard thing and people don't talk about it enough. It is a terrible decision and we have to make it as the humans. We don't usually do that with our humans. But I also hope that if you are caring for an aging human who you love, or going through grief after a loved one, that this book is helpful to you. That's why I wrote it, to hold up that torch for you.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. And it just, when you use that word journey just now, it just brought back to me, that I'm not a crier, but I think it was the third time that I read this. In the journey back from the hospital or from the vet to your house, and that the end has come, and you're like, you're reminiscing about you're talking to him and you're having a conversation about all the things you've done together in his long life. I just lost it.
I'm really glad to hear that. Guys, it has been my goal with this book to make Mark cry, get to the ugly cry. I've not yet made him ugly cry, I don't think. But my goal with this book, of course, is to make the whole world ugly cry. Because I kind of feel like we need that. Like we need the catharsis. And especially right now, after this past year and a half that we've all been through, it's been so hard. And I hope the book is also cathartic. But even you're just talking about that scene, my last drive with Woodrow, who had been in my Jeep literally thousands of times, who came on book tours with me, who went storm chasing with me, who drove cross country with me, went to the beach and the woods and all the things you do with your dog. That last trip, taking him back from the animal hospital to the house when I knew that it was that morning I had to let him go, was like, I still can't read the last chapter of my own book, honestly. Like I can't. And so for those of you who struggle with it, I apologize. But it's a tough chapter. I know it's called December. In case you want to skip it, you can read the whole thing and skip over December. But it also is honest, I think, and important to convey like how very much our dogs mean to us. So that's why it's there.
Ruthie, I see you in the comments saying you need an ugly cry. Well, this is just what the doctor ordered. So Jenna, just one final thought on that emotional last chapter and the crying. I mean, I know that you said how hard it was for you to write it and you were crying. And it reminded me, there's this old movie, Romancing the Stone, and it's about a writer who lives in New York City, I think. And the opening of the movie is the scene of her writing the last chapter of a book, and she's just crying and crying and crying. And she is like this superstar author. And I always love that scene because, she writes these kind of cheesy romance novels in her character in that movie. But as a writer, I always love that scene because I think it just shows, writers really need to believe in their work and they need to be moved by their own work. And if they're not moved by it, nobody's going to be moved by it. You can't like trick the reader into an emotion. Like the emotion sort of starts with the author and then kind of passes downhill to the reader. And I was just sort of wondering when I heard you talk about how emotional it was to write that. Was it like that with your other works too? Maybe not crying and grief and sadness, but maybe other emotions that were present at the ends of those works. But have you always had that powerful emotion when finishing a work?
Yeah, great question. Not surprisingly thoughtful, bro. I always cry when I finish a book, probably from relief. You know that the book is at least in first draft form, and if I get hit by a bus, it exists in the world. So there's that. And also when I'm writing a novel, all my novels are like 400 pages long. So just getting to the culmination of having created something that's that big feels both good and anticlimactic. But when I cry at the end of writing a novel, it's for different reasons. It's for those reasons like relief and just, I made something. There are scenes in my books that arouse really strong emotion in me when I was writing, which I totally 100% agree with you, is what communicates to the reader. You feel as the writer, the transitive property, it gets out to the reader. And that's usually the scenes that readers respond to the most strongly. And I'm not surprised about that, but they're usually embedded in the book. The reason that the Woodrow chapter, that last Woodrow chapter, was so hard is that I was letting him go. And writing that chapter, I knew it was going to be a tough chapter to write. I knew I would have to write it all in one shot. It's like doing a scene in one take or like running across an abyss, right? So I woke up in the morning and I thought, this is the day. I've sort of been dragging my heels about this and I'm going to jump in and write the scene. And in fact, it was so hard to write that in the middle of the scene, I had to get up and go to the bathroom because I was crying so hard that I couldn't see. And I had to blow my nose. And I looked at like my ravaged ass self in the mirror and was just like, I don't know if I can finish this. It's so hard. And then I said, but you have to. Like, you have to finish it. Like, this is the point, is to like, convey this naked emotion to readers so that they feel less alone in their own emotion. So that was like tremendously hard and tremendously gratifying. And I really hope that you all feel both grievous reading the scene, but also comforted because somebody else has gone through this too.
Well, that's a great segue into one of my last questions before we go to some audience questions. And that is one of the things that I love about how you talk about your own work is you always talk about how you write so people won't feel so alone. Mm-hmm. Like the act of writing, and certainly you're somebody who loves being on tour. And you kind of famously with your first book, I think went to like 800 book clubs or something. And you have this like relentless appetite to interact with readers and talk about your own work and how they're responding to it. And what it really is about for you, I think, is community building. And I think that like, I've always loved that because it's such a clear way of looking at what your mission is in the world and how like your mission of being a writer, impacts the world rather than just being you alone with a computer. I mean, it's very clear what the end game is here, and it's an end game about community. And so I just wanted to, kind of ask you about, what kind of community you hope to build here, and do you feel like the community is already being built in some way?
I hope the community is being built. I hope people are ordering Woodrow and soon to receive Woodrow, who has been caught in the supply chain. So I've been posting ridiculous images of my dog caught in the Suez Canal and stuff. But I heard today that one of the bookstores got the books. So they're coming, people. Like, please order your Woodrows so we can build the community. It's true. I think one of the things that Blaze taught me is something that I had sort of known but thought might have been a fluke, which is that I'm a connector. I like to sit in my apartment by myself and have alone time. I desperately need to be out on tour and to hold a hot mic. Like last night when I launched, I was like, the best feeling in the whole world. I'm holding my microphone. So good. So good. But that is about the act of connection, and writing to me is about the act of connection, which is a little strange because, you're sitting alone in your apartment thinking about something, like 2 or 3 years later, it gets out to the person you're intending to give it to. And then like maybe 6 months after that, you're on tour and somebody says, this scene that you wrote really moved me. It helped me talk to my dad. It helped me think differently about my kids. I remember the way you described the sun in this one passage. And that is so gratifying. And yet there's a sort of cognitive dissonance to like having written something on point A and then people get it at point D and they're moved by it. I can also tell you that is the greatest honor. And that is why I do this, so that I hope people, whether it's a sentence or an emotion or a description, that they are moved by it to the point at which they carry it with them and it becomes part of their own emotional fabric. And in that way, we all have this community together where we feel less alone. Like if you've ever sat in your apartment by yourself in your underwear, and if you lost a dog, if you lost a person, if you made untraditional choices and you thought, I'm a freak, you're not a freak. Like, here I am. We can all be little freaks together. And that's kind of what my writing is all about.
That was amazing. I love that answer so much. We can all be little freaks together. God, just
potatoes in the ocean. Little floating potatoes in the ocean.
All right, let's go for a couple questions. Okay, Crystal King. Okay,
Hi,
so away
Crystal.
from the crying, you don't want to hear us talk about crying more. Okay, what was the most viral Woodrow post you had? And just before you answer that, just like explain in 10 seconds what Woodrow's online social media presence was for those who might not know.
Thank you. And yes, Crystal, you would know that because Crystal K is like one of the most social media guru people I know. She's amazing. She teaches me everything I know. So thank you for being here today. Hello, my friend. Away from the crying, I hate to tell you this, but the most viral post that Woodrow had was when he passed, actually. And I had been contemplating this because Woodrow had a very robust, as I said, social media presence. He was on Facebook for years and years. And sort of a newcomer to Instagram, but he's popular over there as well. Now he has a Twitter account, so please follow him on all of those platforms. He can still narrate from beyond the grave. He is still doing his Barack Obama, George Clooney commentary from across the river. But I had been concerned literally for years about Woodrow's passing because I knew that he had a big community who really would write to me behind the scenes and say, Woodrow's posts uplift me every day. Like Woodrow, on the road with a ball, Woodrow on the bench with the ladies, Woodrow on the bench with the maintenance guy, all of those things. And so I look for them every day. And so when he passed, I just wrote my daily joy is gone. And then the dates of his life. And I still can't look at those comments. There were 1,000 comments and I have never looked at them and I can't. Because Woodrow also was a community builder and that was his community. So I think aside from that, one of the posts that people loved, I think the most was when Woodrow was super old, our maintenance guy, John from my building, watched Woodrow for me in the foyer of our building while I ran upstairs and got some water for him because he was having a hard time breathing. And when I came back down the stairs, John was sitting on the steps of the building, on the marble steps, on the floor with Woodrow, and Woodrow had his snout on John's leg. And I just took a quick photo. It's this beautiful black and white photo, and I posted that, and people were just like, oh my God, because that was so Woodrow, it was it didn't matter if it was literally George Clooney or the maintenance guy or the women who cleaned our building, one of whom said age is a privilege, he would just draw people to you and he'd be so sweet. And I think that's what people responded to in all of the posts.
Great. Thank you, Jenna. All right. Let's have a few more audience questions.
Yes, please hit me with questions.
Mm-hmm.
Any question you ever wanted to ask me about Woodrow or anything, please.
Tell us about Henry, please. How is he or not like Woodrow?
Hi, Laura. I see you. Hi, Laura. So Henry, I did his voice a little bit at the beginning of the interview, and I had said that our friend Sonia Larson said that Woodrow was like a gentleman in a dog costume, which was true. Woodrow always had a tuxedo collar for parties. He was very elegant. He had these long legs that he would cross. He'd do elegant cross paws in a gesture that I called Master Paws Theater. And he was just very erudite and very smart. And Henry, who's named after Henry Higgins in My Fair Lady, is totally misnamed. He is not a professor of the English language at all. He is a really, really sweet frat boy. He's if Owen Wilson were a frat boy, going into a party and saying, who's got the keg? And crushing a beer against his forehead. That's Henry, basically. Very sweet, super athletic. He has a dog in a dog suit. So I'm interested to see who he is as he develops and gets older. And those of you I know who have lost old dogs and are concerned about oh, can I get a new dog? And when is the right time to do that? Also a big question, when do I help the dog cross? When do I get a new dog? What I was told before I got Henry was you're going to think he's really weird because he's not your old dog. And he will not make you stop missing your old dog, but he will distract you from missing your old dog because you're going to love the new dog. And that's totally true. Henry, I find very strange. He's not like Woodrow, but he is a total joy to me. And that's what our dogs are.
Great. I think we have one more question from Ellen. Ellen Komisar, thank you for joining us. What would you tell the real George Clooney about Woodrow, the George Clooney of dogs?
Oh my God. Hi, Ellen. You're so great. Thank you. I would say, George, you should play Woodrow in the movie about Woodrow the Clooney of dogs, because I think you're the only one who could carry that off. And, you know, if you don't really feel like doing that, I could do like a riding in cars with celebrities with you and Barack, and we could all talk about Woodrow. That's what I would say. And I think he would go for it. So if any of you know George Clooney, you want to pass him the book, I applaud that. I support that.
Oh my gosh. All right. So thank you so much, everyone. We are going to wrap. I have one more question, but I just want to say, lest anybody think it's only about ugly cries, this is a book about wisdom and life lessons. It's a very funny book. And of course, since it's Jenna Blum, it's very beautifully written. There's just, you kind of go through the whole range of emotions on this book. It's got everything and all packed into like 200 pages. So it's a great holiday gift too, I might add. But Jenna, you know what's coming now, don't you?
Yep.
The final question.
Yep.
Question I ask all authors. So imagine you had an ideal reader for Woodrow on the Bench. Somebody who's getting everything that you're doing, is just at the right place in their life to hear the messages of this book. And they get to the end, they close it, and they look out the window. Just describe for me in a word or a phrase, what is the feeling that this reader has?
So, Mark, I should have come up with an answer to this question, because I know, as your usual producer, that you ask this question every time, and yet I somehow did not prepare for this, and I think that's good. I want them to feel less alone.
Okay.
I mean, I am having like a sort of emotional reaction to saying that, or I would extrapolate on it. But I mean, that is why I write fiction. But fiction is much more oblique in the way it connects people. It puts you in somebody else's skin and hopefully creates some empathy. But with this book, I want it to be a direct conduit from me to the reader, saying, like, if you are sad, if you are lonely, if you're wondering about your life, did I make the right choices? You know, with my dog, with my people that I'm grieving, with the life choices that I made. It's kind of what I said before about, you know, we're all like messy little freaks together. Like, I really want people to read Woodrow and to feel less alone in the world, because, you know, I've had that experience too.
Jenna, you're the best.
No, you, bro.
Folks, I hope you buy this book. You should buy it. You should buy it for all your family members. Anybody who's going through something like this with a pet or with a person. There's just so much in here to comfort you, and as Jenna said, make you feel less alone. Jenna, thank you so much for coming on the show, and thank you for starting a Mighty Blaze, which has been such a great thing for the entire book community.
Oh, thank you for being our bro on the Blaze. Thank you to my Blaze fam, and thank you for our Blaze viewers who are our Blaze fam. I'm really grateful to all of you for joining us today. And yeah, if you need a holiday gift, this it. Give an old dog this year. Give an old dog. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Jenna. Folks, that's it for The Thoughtful Bro this week. We will see you next week, talking to Tuesdays with Memoir author Mitch Albom. And we'll see you then. Thank you, Jenna. Bye.